Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest presentation of the County of Grande Prairie's Business Support Network. My name's Tom, and I'm from the Grande Prairie District Chamber of Commerce, one of a number of partners in the Business Support Network, and always pleased to be working with the county to bring you information about a variety of topics affecting business and the employees that work in those businesses, as well as the owners. And today is one that is very near and dear to my heart because it's an organization that I've volunteered with since 2002, and am very thankful for the work they do in the community, and just so proud of knowing what they do and how they do it and how hard they work to help people with their mental health in Grande Prairie area. And so we welcome the Resource Center for Suicide Prevention to give us a presentation on Tough Enough to Talk About It.
I think that's probably my cue to step in. So thank you so much, Tom. Like I said, it's wonderful to see some familiar faces in the group. So my name is Tracy. I am the coordinator for the Tough Enough to Talk About It program in Grande Prairie. I am new, kind of new and old to the position, but I have worked alongside Tough Enough in one capacity or another for approximately I'm going to say the last 15 years since it kind of started in our town. So it's pretty exciting to be here sharing the information. The other exciting part is this is our very first launch for our virtual workplace presentation. Traditionally, we do in-person presentations. So the fact that we have the ability to do this virtually and still be able to share some really important, just some important skills and messages virtually is pretty exciting in a time that can definitely be very challenging. So we are looking at approximately about an hour. There is a video towards the end as well, so hopefully you don't get too tired of listening to my voice. But I would like just to welcome everybody and thank you to the County of Grande Prairie and the BSN Network for inviting us and providing this opportunity. I am here if you have any questions at all. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the platform and how to raise your hand, but you can always do that. You can unmute your mic and just kind of pop in questions, get my attention. I can see half of you on one screen and half on the other, but there's also the chat box too. So if I happen to miss something in the chat box, my executive director happens to be here enjoying the presentation as well. So hopefully she'll be my eyes and ears, or my second set of eyes, I guess, for my other screen in case I missed something. So like Tom said, Tough Enough to Talk About It is a presentation created by the Resource Center for Suicide Prevention in Grande Prairie. And it was actually developed in response to research that presented itself in the late 1990s regarding suicide rates, men, and just the employment sector in Alberta. There were some kind of alarming rates, and at the time, the Resource Center had the ability and the expertise to develop a program called the Men at Risk program, and really just developed for men in industry and trades and agriculture to find a platform to encourage conversations, those tough conversations that we're often scared to have. Tough Enough, or well, Men at Risk was rebranded in 2016 to Tough Enough to Talk About It program, just really in recognizing that there are an increasing number of females beginning and working in trades, industry, and agriculture that face a lot of the same challenges when it comes to our mental well-being. So the presentation is absolutely designed to increase your knowledge on mental health, but not make you a professional. So you don't get to leave here in an hour going forth and diagnosing everybody. I would say ex-husbands and pets. There's a little bit of gray area, but for now, we'll just leave it at that. Feel free, like I said, to ask questions throughout the presentation. Hopefully I won't miss it. You could always stand up and do jumping jacks. I would probably notice that. You might need it on your lunch break. Sometimes it's hard to maintain focus when we're learning virtually, but I will do my best to make it interesting for you. When we look at objectives, for the Tough Enough to Talk About It program, really, we just want to understand and identify somebody who might be experiencing a decline in their mental well-being, and then increase our confidence in what to say and do. So we can recognize when somebody might be struggling, and then what exactly do I do? And how do I identify resources for that individual to get help or support? It's a pretty tall order for 60 minutes. I will do my best, but we absolutely offer other avenues of training to build that skill set too. So we know you likely spend more time with your coworkers and your families. So it really puts you in an excellent position to really potentially recognize when somebody might be struggling or experiencing that decline in their mental well-being. You can kind of think, I guess, of this presentation like a mini first aid. It's our responsibility to just kind of identify what's going on and how do we connect that individual with some support, that it's not actually up to us to fix or solve that situation, what's going on for the individual, but really just be there for them today and increase that care and comfort and the ability to have conversations and accessing supports. Am I going too fast for you guys? No, I see one couple shakes. Awesome. So we talk about safe space guidelines. So I do ask normally that we don't record or capture screenshots. I think I am being recorded. So, let's up that level of anxiety. But you know what, if that really means that more people can access the information, I'm all for it. I will say, if you can keep your camera on, that would be fantastic. It's not always possible for me to see you, but I get internet bandwidth, different stuff like that can influence that. But sometimes the information can be potentially difficult, and I really want to make sure that everybody is okay and that they're able to learn the information and that they're not experiencing any struggles with it. The last thing I want to do is cause anybody any decline themselves, but so keep that camera on if you can. I get it with bandwidth. If you can't, reach out absolutely to us if you need. I'm also going to provide some resources and information too. Sometimes our instinct when we're uncomfortable with information is to joke around or make light of situations. I will ask that for the next hour we try to avoid this. We just really want to create that safe space for everybody to learn and build their skills and ask questions. So I'll put that forth to you. Any questions? Does it going forward? No, I love virtual learning because I always get really blank stares, or I feel like they're blank because I'm looking all around screens. But like I said, here's some provincial resources for you. You're more than welcome to take a screenshot. Hetty had said that this will be posted, and I can provide some links as well. If you want more information and resources, you absolutely can contact the Resource Center for Suicide Prevention. We have a wonderful lady in our office. That is her sole job, is look at resources in our community. And she's such a fantastic resource for us to have. So I like to use her all the time and make her earn her money there and give me lots of resources. But the teamwork is pretty awesome. So provincial resources, and then just some local resources too. So if you do find yourself in that situation where you are providing support to a family member or a friend or a coworker or even a staff member that's struggling, there are absolutely some fantastic local resources we can point in that direction. All right, I'm going to show those again at the end of the presentation. So let's get into the actual content rather than the setup. I'm going to start with just a little quick story. I have it up there on the screen that you can read as well. But I'm going to refer back to it a little bit throughout the presentation because I think it's pretty realistic for us in the sense to what we can go through, what you guys potentially can go through. So you're the manager at a small local restaurant, and one of your team members has approached you, and they're very concerned about their coworker, Adam. So Adam, you've heard rumors going around that Adam is separated from his partner, and you know Adam well and that he's been struggling with college courses and he's working extra hours to pay for his schooling. And he said a couple of times that he really misses being far away from his family. So your team member that came to you tells you that Adam seems really withdrawn when they're working together. He's been late a couple of times this week. And they also said that he really isn't doing much while he's at work, but looking at social media. And a couple of customers have complained that he isn't being very friendly. So your team member tells you that they've already tried talking to Adam while they're at work, but he really just looks at them and says, you know what, it's none of your business, and I'm managing just fine. This team member is really worried, and they've come to you for some direction. So what would you do in that situation? I'm not looking for you to give me the answers or anything like that, because I'm going to show you here with 4 options. So you can just think to yourself, you can put it in the chat box if you feel brave, just maybe at option 1, 2, or 3. But just to be clear, there's no right or wrong answer for this. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to make you feel like you don't know, because hopefully at the end of this presentation, you're going to be able to look at those 4 solutions and be like, oh, now I know, or you know what? I think I'm still going to do the same thing or change. So what would we do? Would we thank the team member and let them know that they should keep trying to reach Adam and see if he'll open up? Or would we register our team members for some wellness training? Maybe thank that team member for confiding in us, but be very clear on the work and fun boundaries that they did what they could, and that's good. Or number 4, reassure the team member that they in fact did the right thing by coming to you, and that you will set some time away set some time aside to talk with Adam. So if we start with some stressors in that story. So like I said, no right or wrong answer, but we are going to revisit it at the end to see if we can identify maybe what's the healthiest response, because they're all good responses. But if we start with some stressors, Adam mentions, or I guess not Adam mentions, but we recognize some stressors in that story, stressors that Adam is experiencing. So things like a relationship breakdown, or struggling with his college courses and money to pay for those college courses. He also says that he misses his friends and his family because he's had to move away. Those can be stressors, and stressors or events that cause stress can contribute to somebody struggling or somebody acting differently. Whatever those stressors are, individuals experience different stressors in their life. Does that kind of make sense? I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on it here for you. So we know that stress is an everyday part of our life, and it can be a motivating factor that actually increases my ability to perform in the workplace or in my family unit or whatever my kind of duties are. If I have no stress, look at, I'm talking with my hands like you guys can see me. If you have no stress, if we look, can you see my cursor on that little half wheel there? Right at the beginning where it says unaware and bored and comfortable, those are in the red, because if I have no stress, if I have nothing to work for, nothing motivating me, I'm not very productive. And that's not a very healthy place to be. Once I have a few stressors and that motivation starts, then I can kind of get into my groove, and I have those motivating factors that encourage me to do things, and in fact, do things better. Everybody has that different threshold as to when that stress becomes overwhelming. So we start off with no stress and we're having a hard time. We get to that peak performance, or that this is my wheelhouse. This is where I'm doing really fantastic. I'm meeting all those stressors. My coping skills are kicking in and I'm dealing with it and life is good. And then sometimes those stressors can be really overwhelming as well. And that takes us right into that red area. Everyone has that individual threshold, their individual or their capacity to manage stress, because really our mental well-being is all about me. That's going to make a little bit more sense. But my ability to deal with stressors is going to be different than Ainsley's or different than Tom's. Some stressors are going to affect me more and some are going to impact me less. But really it's about being aware of how those stressors can impact us, and that the more coping skills we have, the better we can deal with that stress, or the more resources that we have in our life really helps us maintain in that green area. That's obviously where we want to hang out. But again, it's different factors. So for Adam in our story, it was relationship breakdowns and struggling with courses. For me, some of the stressors in my life lately have been, 3 teen daughters at home learning while I'm learning to work from home. That's been a struggle for me. And I know that I really need to rely on some coping skills that I've developed to keep me right in that green. Because if I'm not accessing supports and resources, if I'm not or acknowledging it, I'm going to move into this orange or this red. And then there's going to be some different changes going on, and I'm not going to be coping very well. The more stressors I have, the harder it is for me. And that can increase my struggling or a decline in my mental well-being. Does that make sense? When we look at stressors and how they can impact us, every industry has its own stressors, its own unique stressors that can increase stress levels for employees, right? When I used to work in a restaurant when I was in university, it was the fast pace, but yet always still really having to be nice, and, you know, your ability to be nice and succeed in that environment dictated how much money I made in tips. Those were stressors, and I had to figure out how to learn that. When we look at trades and industry for stressors, these are the stressors that can contribute to that optimal performance, that green area, but it can also take us into those red and orange areas where we look at that unmanaged stress and how it impacts us. Since people often spend more time at their place of employment, it's a lot of times those workplace stressors that begin to overwhelm individuals. So things like boom and bust, or that boom and bust cycle, especially in the oil fields in Grande Prairie. Maybe it's unemployment or the constant threat of unemployment. Could be maybe layoffs. We know that that happens often. Sometimes it's the industry culture too. And every industry that we work in has its own culture. And that culture can really add sometimes additional stress. Sometimes it can contribute to those stressors, and sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on that individual. Maybe it's isolation or shift work, poor weather. If you guys can think of stressors that might not be captured on there, feel free to just pop them right into that chat box too. Maybe it's difficult working conditions. My partner has been working out in Farmington this week, and it's windy, and he just finds that wind so draining and exhausting to be working out in the wind for 14 hours. You know, that in itself, those working conditions can be part of those stressors, or long, irregular work days. Maybe it's the politics that surround the field that you work in, or even the climate, the political climate now, or pandemic. There's so many different things that are specific to different areas. Could be financial strain or physicals. Sometimes, absolutely, Tom, sometimes it's the coworkers. Sometimes it's that culture, that environment that you're working in too, can add to those stressors. But really it's about, we do experience these stressors. When we're able to manage them, we can maintain our mental well-being, but sometimes they can be overwhelming. And sometimes my coping skills can kick in and I can manage them. And sometimes I need some support, and I may realize that I need that support, and I may not. Just like Tom, or just like, not Tom, but just like Adam in our story at the beginning, he's probably not recognizing that he's not doing well. His coworkers are. And that's where we talk about, it's that relationship. And sometimes those coworkers and family members are the best people to recognize it. That unmanaged and overwhelming stress increases the risk of mental health problems for individuals, like depression and anxiety and substance use. Oops. Just some stresses for agriculture too. Just again, some of that financial strain or weather, farm management, technology. I used to live on a working farm, and technology was a real struggle for a lot of the individuals there. Technology doesn't come natural to people unless you're 15 or 13, maybe 12. Some of us have to work pretty hard at mastering it. And again, those long, irregular days, when we look at agriculture, a lot of times the home is the workspace, or there's equipment failures, or isolation, could be geographical isolation, commodity prices. You know, when we look at disease and animals, a lot of different stressors that we don't always take into account. Right? And it doesn't matter if it's trades or industry, if it's agriculture, if it's working at the Resource Center for Suicide Prevention or the County of Grande Prairie. Every job has its own unique stressors, and it's about how we manage them to try to maintain our positive well-being or our mental well-being. Any questions moving forward? I feel like I'm going through this really fast, but the pace is good for everybody. Yeah, I got a few nods. That's good. So we look at mental well-being. I've kind of talked a little bit about that term and what it is. The definition of mental well-being allows for individuals to understand really that their mental health is all about who they are, that your mental health is very, very individualized for that individual and for you. It's really about how you cope with stress and how you work productively and really how you contribute to your community. That community is however that individual defines it, whether it's family, workplace, maybe it's their faith-based community, but are they connecting with something bigger than themselves, right? So that's your mental well-being, is when something happens, how are you coping with it? How are your emotions and your behaviors and your thoughts? So when there's a decline, we see that change in that individual's baseline. How they're performing or behaving, I guess, normally. I don't really like the term normally, but what is normal or baseline for that individual then changes kind of a negative way. We see those changes in the way they think or they behave or how they interact with others, right? Different from who they normally are. That's my opportunity to check in with the individual. When I see those changes, that's my opportunity to identify that someone is struggling or maybe having a hard time and check in with them or start that conversation, ask some questions. That's where we get really scared, right? It's how do we check in? How do we ask? And how do we do that? I promise you, we're going to get there. So just a little bit more concrete on what that decline in mental well-being might look like. This is not an exhaustive list of signs and symptoms. So just really, it's important to keep that in the back of your mind, and that not everybody experiences the same signs and symptoms, just like our mental health and my ability to cope and deal is different. So is maybe how I recognize or how I experience it. Some signs and symptoms are really commonly known and understood, and some might be more of a surprise to you. So if we take a look at some of those, what that decline might look like, it could be somebody who's irritable or angry when they're not normally irritable and angry. Maybe we see some expressions of sadness or hopelessness that normally isn't present. Could be a change in eating habits or the change in their weight. Maybe it's an increase in substance use. Maybe they're starting to smoke more, drink more, or it's occurring at the workplace, or it's bleeding into the workplace. Maybe they talk about physical concerns like stomach aches or muscle tension or fatigue. They're talking about being tired all the time, or we see the effects of them being tired. Maybe they just have no enjoyment in activities that they previously enjoyed, right? They've stopped doing stuff that they normally got enjoyment out of. Maybe they're experiencing some guilt, or they just seem restless. Because remember, it's not about, it is about what we see and those changes. What is different for that individual? These are kind of like those invitations for us to have conversations with them. Maybe they're downplaying their symptoms or minimizing it. I'm fine, nothing is wrong. Maybe they're experiencing or partaking in some risky behaviors. Maybe they're I guess they're probably not talking about a lower absent sex drive, but maybe that's what they're experiencing. Maybe they're overworking, right? Or avoiding. Avoiding is kind of a common one when we look at workplaces, is going to work early in the morning and staying late. So everybody's like, oh my goodness, look at that rock star employee. But really, they're just overworking as a form of avoidance because things are going on and they don't know what's going on and they don't know how to work through it. Maybe that individual is experiencing a relationship breakdown, or they've had high job turnovers, maybe some isolation, or they're withdrawing from their social contacts. Maybe they're experiencing low self-esteem. This isn't an exhaustive list. This isn't the be all and end all that people only experience this, but it is a start to recognizing those changes in behaviors, right? And often, just to let you guys know, you're not going to see just one. So maybe we see change in eating habits. Well, I've dieted before. I've tried to lose weight. I've gone to the gym. So there was a change in eating habits. That doesn't mean that my mental well-being is declining. But if you see that change, maybe I'm losing weight or gaining weight, and I'm starting to isolate myself and not go to the break room at lunchtime, or you know what, I'm showing up early and I'm staying late at the expense of something else, then that's when we take that look, kind of step back and go, that's a little different for Tracy. Something's going on. I wonder what it is. And then what happens is when somebody's experiencing that decline in mental well-being and their coping skills or their inherent skills and resources aren't helping, it gets worse. Their mental health just doesn't magically get better because they, had a Pop-Tart in the morning. It takes a lot of work. And if that work or those resources aren't being accessed, then that mental well-being is going to significantly decline. And what happens is the more that mental well-being or the more their mental illness or their mental health declines, the higher the risk for suicide becomes. Right. And so when we know that, when we look at somebody who's at risk for suicide, really, when somebody is thinking of suicide, there's a part of them that wants to live. We often fall into that. Everybody who thinks about suicide just wants to die. And that's a myth that's perpetuated in our news and in our media. And in reality, most people who are contemplating suicide, they don't want to die. They just don't see any other options. That's my opportunity to have a conversation with them, right? I often think of somebody who's at risk for suicide where their mental well-being has declined significantly, that becomes then an option for them as a balloon. And you blow a balloon up really, really, really tight and that pressure is there. It's not my job through conversations to make all of that pressure and that air leave that balloon. That's a pretty tall order for somebody who just takes, or watches a 60-minute presentation on mental health. That's even a tall order for somebody who's gone to school for 6 years in order to provide support and therapy. So I need to take the onus off myself that it's my job to fix that situation. What my role really becomes is to be with that person, provide a level of comfort and conversation, and reduce a little bit of pressure out of that balloon. So then I can have a conversation with that individual about supports and how to build a little bit of that hope and optimism through conversation. It's really realistic. I can recognize when somebody might be struggling if I'm paying attention and I know what to look for, and then I can have conversations, knowing that it's not my job to solve it. It can be really difficult to know if someone's thinking about suicide, but certain factors can absolutely increase risk. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but I kind of look at these warning signs as indicators, indicators for me to start a conversation, indicators for me to show a little bit of care and compassion and empathy, and things I can explore in a conversation. Warning signs can be subtle, and it's likely that you will actually notice more than one. And if I could give you, I guess, any guidance, really, is let your instincts guide you. To some extent, the fact that you guys are voluntarily here learning about this information shows that you inherently want to help and that you already are paying attention. So how do we use that? If you think that somebody might be at risk for suicide, chances are they are. It just takes us a long time to notice because we're busy raising kids, we're busy working, we're busy trying to survive in a global pandemic and define our new normal. And my advice is always pay attention and take it seriously. So the warning signs we might see could be reckless behavior without regard for their life, right? Increase in substance use. Maybe they're making jokes about suicide when normally they never talked about it or made those jokes before. Maybe there's a change in behavior where they've experienced a significant loss or crisis, or they're talking about the pressure just being too much, right? That balloon that we talked about with that pressure and that stress just getting to be too much for the individual. When we look at more immediate signs, talking of or having a plan, maybe they're talking about wanting to die or looking for a way to kill themselves. And I put those in bold because although they are all warning signs, those are more of an immediate one. But really, if we're recognizing any of these signs, or even those signs that we talked about of declining mental well-being, then that's my opportunity to have that conversation with the individual. Any questions? No? All right. So I know I went through that stuff really fast, just kind of as a bit of a guideline, because anytime somebody takes a presentation, they want to leave with skills. It's all right, you've given me the information, but now what do I do with it? And how do I apply that information? Recognizing that you're not the professional in this situation, and it's not your job to solve the issue or make it go away. That if we're concerned that somebody might be struggling, then that's the opportunity for us to initiate a conversation about support and resources and listen. So like I said before, don't ignore your gut feelings, because generally by the time that we notice someone might be struggling, they've been silently struggling for a long time. They're just not as good at hiding it from us. Whatever coping skills they were using to hide it isn't working anymore. And it usually takes us time to notice it, because we're all busy with multiple roles within our lives, and it divides our attention and our focus. So don't wait until tomorrow or next week, because it might be too late to have that conversation. Or even if we think about having that conversation with Adam from the story at the beginning, and when Adam is struggling, if we wait to the next day, he's that much deeper in debt. He's that much more distanced from his family. It's not getting better for him, right? It is a common misconception that somebody might get mad at you for initiating that conversation, or that they're mad or frustrated that you recognize their symptom or what they're doing, what's going on for them. But let me tell you guys, I've had a lot of conversations about mental health with individuals in my 20-some year career of working frontline of mental health. There is not one time that stands out in my mind where somebody got mad at me for having a genuine conversation with them. I think that's the fear we put on ourselves, that what if, because we haven't been in that situation. So, what do I do if they get mad? Okay, well, what do we do if they get mad? We apologize and just say, you know what, I'm sorry, I was paying attention and I thought I actually noticed this. I'm actually glad to hear that you're doing well. I hope you have a great day. And chances are tomorrow they're going to come to you and say, you know what, you were right yesterday. I'm ready to talk now. I always tell my children, because my children, mental health is really big with a lot of their friends now, and talking and kind of exploring those topics. And they always say, but I don't know when to step in. And I always say, would you rather have a mad friend or a dead friend? And I use that a lot with adults too, is don't be scared, because we're always scared of the what ifs, but the what ifs very rarely happen. And if somebody gets mad at me, they at least know that I care. So how do I ask? That can be the most intimidating part of that conversation. The absolutely hardest part of the process, because we're hesitant, we're afraid of what that conversation might look like, and we put the responsibility of fixing it on ourselves. So if I ask somebody how they're feeling, and if they say, you know what, I'm feeling really crappy and I don't know what to do, we automatically think, uh-oh, I have to fix it, and I don't know how to fix it. That's not our job. Right? We always think, what if they want to die? Or what if I say the wrong thing? What if they get mad at me? And what if I don't know how to fix it? Remember what I said about what ifs? They usually don't happen. We put those expectations, and it kind of just, I don't know if this dates me when I say this, but it kind of psychs me out, right? Like it makes me not want to do it and not want to participate. But let me put it this way. If you saw someone struggling with a heavy load of groceries, would you hesitate to ask if you could help? Would you sit back and go, maybe I'll help them tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow I'll ask them if they're struggling. Tomorrow I'm going to set aside time to make sure that they're okay. But they're struggling with those groceries right at that time. Right? I don't know. If we've seen somebody having a hard time breathing or just a hard time catching their breath, would we hesitate? Or would we ask right away? The asking is not as scary as we make it out to be. Literally, if you are present and genuine, They're gold, because people in crisis, they're looking for that support. I would say approach with attention, or not attention, pardon me, approach with intention. And most of the time, you're going to have to ask twice. Because if somebody's never been approached in a very genuine way to talk about their mental health, they're going to say, no, 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 I'm fine. Don't worry about me. But it's that second time when you say, okay, but are you really okay? Like, how are you actually doing? That's when we see that gold and we see individuals start to open up. And don't be worried about saying the wrong thing. Individuals in crisis or when they're struggling, they're way more forgiving than we are. We put that judgment on ourselves. Letting someone know that we've noticed something is a very powerful thing. It reinforces that they feel noticed and that somebody cares about them. Starting in that comfortable setting, right? If I wanted to approach somebody in my office, I probably wouldn't do it right at the front in where, you know, my director has a big glass wall and can see everything. That can be really intimidating. Or if we're at the end of a safety meeting, it's like, hey, you know what, Ainsley, I'd like to talk to you about something. It's really important, I've noticed. You know, maybe pay attention to how you're approaching somebody. And if it doesn't work, try approaching in a different way. Asking open-ended questions and knowing that we can, in fact, actually ask about suicide. That it's not taboo. That it's not an inappropriate thing to ask about. Right? We can ask directly how they're doing, and we can say, do you want to die? Have you thought about suicide? There's a myth out there that really, if I ask somebody, I might put the idea in their head. Right? That what if I ask them and they haven't thought about it? Now they're going to think about it because I've asked them. I think you're giving yourself a little too much credit in how you can influence that person. But I've never had anybody, you guys, in 20 some years of asking people this really difficult question, look at me and say, no, but now that you mention it, it sounds like a heck of an idea. It doesn't happen that way. I promise you that. Most of the time when you ask those really tough questions, this is what you see. How did you know? It's like somebody's just taken the weight of the world off of their shoulders. And there's power in that just by starting a conversation. When we listen, I would say this is kind of hard too, the hard part of the conversation, because a lot of us are really busy and we don't take the time to stop and actually listen. A lot of us listen to respond. So we're paying attention to the next thing we're going to say as the person's telling us their story or what they're experiencing, and we're not actually there present with them. So don't give advice, focus on actual listening, and don't just listen to respond. When I say don't give advice, I've experienced some mental health struggles in my lifetime. And I remember during one of them, my auntie would always tell me, you know, Tracy, if you just think happy thoughts, you're going to feel better. One more person tells me to think happy thoughts, I tell you, because I didn't try it. It was something I tried lots, but it was that advice. And I really didn't feel like my auntie was listening to me, that she was actually hearing what I was saying, that I was trying all of this stuff and I was still struggling, right? Keeping that stress and distress and those thoughts secret, it's just like a boiler that's going to burst under pressure. It's like that balloon that I talked about, that balloon that is just building that pressure and building that pressure. A natural release for that pressure is for that individual to be able to talk, for them to be able to actually express their feelings and their concerns in a very safe space. And we did that when we set that comfortable setting by asking questions and paying attention to where I was asking, and then by showing that I'm listening and that I'm empathetic and not sympathetic. There's a very high probability, you guys, that the individual who is struggling hasn't engaged in support because they're worried about the judgment. They're worried about what other people will think if they ask for support, and they don't want to be negatively judged. So part of creating that environment is being present and actually listening. Once somebody has a chance to actually talk about their situation, a lot of times they think of solutions for themselves. And it limits the work that we need to do because we're just fostering and facilitating their kind of reflection on looking what is working for them. And sometimes just taking away a little bit of that pressure gives them the space where they can do that. Any questions? No? All right. Let's see. Thanks, Hetty. She's giving me the old shake in the head. So how do we get help, right? When we look at those 3 really kind of easy steps in the presentation is asking, right? Initiating that conversation, listening and reducing a little bit of that pressure and really helping that individual feel like they've been heard and that somebody cares and has noticed. Then what do? Right? We connect individuals to resources that are appropriate for their situation. Find out who they think they can talk to, resources that they can access. Right? The more involved the individual is in understanding and accepting, the more likely they're actually going to follow through. I can sit and tell you, you need to go do this and you need to do that and you need to do that. And then I'm like, okay, great, I've done my job, and I walk away. But really, I've just dictated to the person what they need to do. I haven't involved them in that process. So have that conversation with them. What does support look like for them? Maybe it's crisis lines. Maybe it's 911, right? Really getting help is about, how do I instill hope and optimism? How do I instill that hope that things can get better? Because it's really, really hard when you're in crisis or you're struggling with your mental health to know that it can get better, that people can and do recover. So talking about things like support groups or counseling, right? Maybe there's an elder in their community that they connect with, or a faith-based leader. I always say, I always ask them what's happened in the past, because chances are they've experienced tough times before and they're here talking to us. So something has worked, but we forget. Right? We forget a lot of the times things that work for us. So sometimes it's about having that conversation. What's worked in the past could work in the future as well. And then always following up with the individual. Whenever it's possible to follow up, it's building those relationships. It's increasing that accountability. A lot of times people who are struggling need support more than once. It's not like we can just have one conversation and we magically solve everybody's issues. It's laying that foundation and having more than one conversation. Like with Adam from the beginning, that story in the restaurant, right? The staff approached Adam, or the coworker approached Adam, and he's like, nope, I'm good. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. But maybe the next time that Adam is approached, he might go, okay, you know, somebody is actually paying attention, and break down that wall little by little by little in building that trust. If we think that the individual is at a high risk for suicide, or we have that conversation and they say yes, then obviously those resources are going to be a lot more immediate than, you know, connecting with other supports. It's going to be what resources and supports are available 24/7. What are those short-term goals, and how are we, pardon me, how are we going to get them help? Talking to them about substance use, and really just getting that immediate help, whether it's through 911 or through a mobile crisis team, which we're pretty lucky to have through our RCMP here locally. Right? And know that there's other training out there. So if the asking, listening, and getting help seems so overwhelming, how do I build my skills? How do I increase my skill set so I have more confidence? Because let's be honest, in an hour, I'm just giving you tidbits of information. To actually build those skills, there's further training available. Things like, if you've ever heard assist courses or mental health first aid, stuff like that, I can definitely give you guys more information at the end of the presentation on that. The one beautiful thing about Tough Enough to Talk About It is the incorporation of lived experience. I can sit up here and tell you this is what it's like to live with a mental health problem, but currently I'm not struggling. I am in recovery. We normally have a volunteer component. In the world of 2020, having a volunteer present virtually with us is a very difficult option. So we are lucky in the sense that we do have videos. These videos were produced locally, and I absolutely love them. I've done lots of mental health training actually across Canada, and I keep coming back to these videos because I think there's so much value in it. I will tell you it's 15 minutes, so it is a bit long, but we get to see the journey that a couple, probably about 3 or 4 local individuals have with their lived experience. I'm not going to give you a whole lot of homework when you watch this video because I know it's probably your lunch break and you're volunteering to take this presentation. But if you could look while you're watching the video on, can you see where they talk maybe a little bit about stigma or how they were asked, how their coworkers recognized and asked them if they were okay and how they got help. Okay. Any questions on that? No, this is like the questionless group. It's a little hard virtually. What I will get you to do though, if you could mute your video. I know I said before, don't turn your video off. And I'm going to tell you to turn your video off because the video will stream a whole lot nicer on Zoom if you do mute your video. And then we're just going to have a little quick discussion about it after. So thank you.
Mental health issues affecting Canadian workplaces are a much larger concern than most people realize. Almost 1 in 2 Canadian workers are currently or have previously experienced a mental health issue. The highest occupation group represented in suicide statistics over a 10-year period in the Peace Country were people working in trades and industry.
Far back as I can remember, I have had thoughts of suicide and depressive types of feelings. I thought that was normal. I thought that was something that people did. My depression stays with me pretty much 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. In the old days, people would push truck drivers as hard as they could to just be creative with their logbooks. Hours of service were something that you tried to dodge around somehow. You'd go all day and then go all night. By the time you came off shift, you were a walking zombie. You're totally exhausted and frustrated by all kinds of things. Your temper was just shot. So what would you do? You'd go to the bar, drink all night, get up the next morning, get on your quad, have a hell of a good time on your quad or your snowmobile, smash the hell out of it. You know, the next few days you'd rebuild the engine or replace broken parts or whatever and go do it again. And then after all that, you'd go back to work for 17 days and you haven't rested. You maybe got a few hours here, a few hours there. That's good enough. No, it isn't. Sleep is an extremely essential commodity when it comes to brain health. Getting an ample amount of sleep is critical. If you're taking shortcuts on your sleep, yes, you can still function. Can you function as well? No. An example of what I'm talking about, pushing hard, do the work hard, play hard type of thing, is I was asked to haul an oil field tool to LAX. So they called me at the last minute and a day late and told me that this tool had to be in LAX by 2 o'clock the next afternoon. Made it there in about a day and a half, 2 hours early so that they had lots of time to load. My logbook was about a day behind. I hadn't slept in I don't know how many hours, at least a day and a half, going steady. I'd fall asleep at the wheel and wake up and stop at a coffee shop and pour some coffee into me, grab a quick nap and keep on going. If I would have had an accident in that period of time, certainly I would have been charged with vehicular manslaughter, and the probability of having an accident in that time was tremendously high.
Most corporations will tell you the most dangerous thing you'll ever do working at this company is driving to and from work. And those in the transportation industry, they are the professional drivers, and they need to rise to that occasion, because traffic fatalities is the second leading cause of death. And until I had some education, I didn't understand that what the first cause of death was suicides. And it's rampant. People just don't hear so much about it. The news always covers a traffic fatality. They don't really get into the aftermath of what that person has to put up with it, actually survive a crash. But the key to it is, it's like any job. If you understand the risk and you do the proper things to not get in situations where you're overtired, where you maybe were up with your friends the night before, or you weren't sleeping because different things were going on, you're maybe a little bit depressed, or you're not eating properly. Those kind of things are absolutely high risk to people. And there's so many potentials on the road, you have to be watching out for everybody else. Distracted driving, all the other type of things that lead to incidents happening. If you're not well rested, if you're not ready to go sharp, doing a proper plan, then work your plan, it's a situation that's just catastrophic. It's an accident waiting to happen.
7 million Canadians will experience mental health problems this year. 500,000 Canadians are absent from work each day, on average, due to mental health reasons. In Alberta, suicide is the highest cause of injury death, and at least 75% of these deaths are men.
I've worked 41 years in Northern Alberta in trades and industry. I experienced stress and depression, and I experienced it to a level that I didn't really care whether I went home at the end of the day or not. In the last 41 years, 5 of my co-workers have died by suicide, and 6 of my relatives have, cousins, uncles, and aunts. So I've had experience with it. I've felt it personally. Unmanaged stress leading to depression, leading to destructive behavior, at-risk behavior, taking huge risks with heavy equipment, and really not caring what the outcome was. Today, when I look back on some of the things that I did while I was working, extremely dangerous behavior, extremely hazardous, and putting others at risk, not just myself, but putting everyone in the workplace at risk, and not realizing that I had a big problem. When I look back on it now too, as well, is the fact that none of my coworkers was willing to come and talk to me about my issue, but they would talk easily to one another about the issue, about me, and for some reason they either didn't feel that it was their business to come and talk to me about it, or they just didn't feel that they wanted to get involved. Today, I would definitely walk up to a co-worker or anyone that I felt was at risk doing the things that I was doing, and approach them and talk about it, try to get them to open up about it. So my current role is in industrial hygiene, health and safety, loss control. And it's ironic that I ended up there because of my behavior. When I think back, when I was struggling in the behavior, I would have never ever guessed in a million years I would end up in a health and safety role, a caring role. And it is so extremely important that workplaces pay attention to and watch for things like signs and symptoms of workers who are struggling, changes in behaviors that you need to address, no different than a physical environment of putting up a handrail or a guard to protect people.
In industry, long hours are common, and long hours are often worked with the same people day in and day out. And so co-workers are in a very unique situation to be able to know their fellow workers well, to know what is going well in their lives and what isn't going well. And so really, really important for co-workers, when they notice something is off with someone, to have that opportunity or take that be tough enough to talk about it, I guess is the way to say it, right? You want to have them intervene and do something. Why are you behaving in this way? I've seen you reacting differently. What's going on? And sometimes you'll learn it's nothing serious. Other times you may see that, hey, there's an underlying issue here that this person needs help and assistance with. And all it takes is opening that door to allow that to come out and get that person on the right track.
Here are some warning signs that you can be aware of. Watch for changes in behavior, low energy level, and a negative attitude. People at risk for mental health problems may have no patience and a short temper. They may also withdraw from you or others and have no interest in socializing. You might notice alcohol or drugs being used as a way to cope with or avoid problems. Often you can recognize lack of sleep or a change in eating habits. You might hear them talk about the pressure being too much. They might be acting impulsively or taking risks. Other signs to watch for are unexplained absences or missing work completely. All of these signs could be caused by the death of someone close to them, a loss of relationship or their job, or maybe even a health crisis.
I've been in the oil patch for 30 years now. I had a situation that brought me into working with the Men at Risk program. I lost a friend to suicide, and I tried to help him deal with his mental illness. Unfortunately, the mental illness took his life. We tried to fix things typical man style, and it doesn't work. You need professional help. You need to recognize the signs before suicide gets to a critical point. Not everyone who is depressed is suicidal, but everyone who dies by suicide is depressed. After my friend's death, it became apparent to me that I needed my own counseling, and I've now got a better balance to my life. I enjoy my work, but I also make sure I make time for myself. I take time off to be with friends, to do my hobbies. That's my stress relieving part, and that's very important to my life right now. If you do see the signs in yourself, please take that first step and seek help. It's important to you. Life is short. Make sure that you enjoy it, and you need to deal with the illness same as every other illness. So take the steps and help yourself out and enjoy life.
The oil and gas sector definitely is a work hard, play hard mentality. The operators are strong individuals. You're out there by yourself, you're working alone. But there's times, right? There's morning when you're having coffee, there's morning times when you're reviewing your wells, maybe afternoon safety meeting or something. There's time to talk to individuals, and if you feel like you need help, you know, or you're feeling down about stuff in your life or issues in your life, talk to your peers about it, and look to your company. Lots of companies have employee assistance programs that can help you. It's typically a 1-800 phone number that you would phone. It's usually a service provider to your company, so it is strictly confidential. Be tough enough to make that phone call. That's the tough part for a lot of people, is recognizing that you have to make that phone call.
If you are recognizing signs and symptoms of at-risk behavior, take the person aside in a private location. Be specific about what signs you've noticed. Try and listen openly without judgment or offering advice. Just having someone listen while they talk about pressures and problems can be a big relief. Learn from Glenn's experience that you and your coworker or friend may not be able to fix it yourselves. Offer your support for them to get professional help, and follow up to see how things went. You'll never make a situation worse by asking about what's going on and offering your support to get help. If the first person they seek help from doesn't work for them, don't stop. Keep looking for another resource that will be a better fit. And finally, get a commitment from them to do something about it. If you are the person at risk, consider talking to someone today. Your health and well-being is worth the effort it takes. Don't give up.
So welcome back after the video. I got a couple messages during the video that there was a bit of a lag time. My apologies for that. Every time I tried to click on it, the video shut down and then I'd have to restart it. So that's a good heads up to technology on my end that I'll have to figure it out because it was good for me, but and I don't know if anybody recognized any voices in there. Mr. Pura. But again, so just before the break, feel free to turn your cameras back on if you would like, now that the video is done streaming. But just before we watched the video, I had asked if you could just see if anybody could pick out kind of that ask or getting help or any of those topics. And if anybody feels like sharing anything that they learned from the video or something that might have kind of given them a bit of an aha or really stuck with them, please feel free to share. You can share either in the chat group or you can raise your hand or you can just unmute your mic and pop right on. So I'll tell you, it doesn't matter how many times I watch that video. I get goosebumps just listening to people that I know talk about their lived experience in the messages that it does convey. Absolutely. Thank you, Hetty. One thing that really the very first time and subsequently every time I watch the video that kind of stands out is in the middle of the video, Rod talks about no one was willing to come and talk to me, but they would easily talk to each other about me. And I think, you know, we've all experienced that at some point in workplaces, and hopefully moving forward, just recognizing the impact that that can have on somebody accessing supports kind of sticks in the back of our mind. And even Rob, he says quite a few little gems in there. He says there's always a place to talk to somebody. There's always a place to start that conversation, right? He said maybe it's morning coffee or afternoon safety meetings that staff are in a unique position to recognize. And then they did mention a little bit about early intervention, which I didn't talk about in the presentation, but it does come up in the video. So that early intervention, when Glenn says it's important to recognize the signs before it gets worse, I'll tell you, I have made a career about presenting across Canada in mental health. And one of the things that a lot of times we forget is early intervention works so good in our physical health, but it doesn't, or we don't always give it the importance that it needs to when it comes to our mental health. We are really good at doing early intervention for physical health. You know, the earlier, if I have breast cancer, the earlier it's detected, the less invasive my treatment is going to be. Not that it's going to be an early or easy job, but the less invasive it's going to be than if it's diagnosed later on in my life. And it's exactly the same when it comes to mental health problems. The earlier individuals can access support and resources and have those meaningful conversations, the easier it's going to be for them to recover their positive mental well-being, to get back to where that baseline or that normal is for them. And I think it's really important that that video highlights it. So moving on, just talking about some resources. It took me a while to understand this slide, and once I understood it, I fell in love with this slide, and I actually use it in a bunch of different presentations because I think it's really important. When we talk about accessing supports and resources or that getting help, it's really important to understand that a lot of times the answers or the solutions, we have them, we just don't see them. So many answers to our problems exist within ourselves, whether it's our coping skills, the protective factors that we foster, maybe our belief systems, things that we've experienced, things that we've gone through in the past that might work in the front or in the thing. So if we think of the circles on that slide as a funnel, and so we're looking down, I'm pointing to my screen like you guys can see me, but if we look at those circles as if it's the top of that funnel, and we're looking down, it all centers around me. We see you, because it's all about me and what's going to work for me where I am in my mental well-being. right? So we talk about those experiences and those coping skills and protective factors and beliefs that often our support, we can answer that, and it lies within us. Sometimes though, we do need to widen our view. We need to enlarge that scope of the circle to find more answers or find more ideas or more guidance, so we can go to the friends and families. As long as they're healthy, friends and families, they are amazing supports for individuals, right? And then widening again a little bit more to coworkers or mentors that we might have the privilege of working with in our lives, or maybe it's neighbors, maybe it's an employee assistance program, or it's an employee family assistance program. So for those of you that don't know, some agencies will have what's called an EAP provider, and that's inherent within the workplace, that individuals can access supports and services through there within their organization. And then widening it one more for that funnel is helplines or support groups, elders, doctors, counselors. Maybe it's a walk-in clinic or faith-based supports, or maybe some websites that are legitimate and helpful, right? And the thing that I like about this funnel is when you need help, all of those supports and resources funnel towards you. You are the core of that, those supports and resources. If you invert that funnel or that cone when you are feeling healthy, all of those supports that you work to build support you. They build that foundation for you to stay healthy or to maintain that healthy mental well-being. So lots of times people, they don't give the I guess, credence to the supports and services that they really should, because we are building our own community of support within ourselves to keep ourselves healthy. So now that I've had that opportunity to share all of my information with you, if we go back to Adam, and I told you that I would show you that slide again into what would you do, just a little bit of self-reflection if your answer has changed or if you are already on the right track, right? So I say there's no right answers. There's no right or wrong answer, but there is a better and healthier way of reacting. And that is absolutely reassuring your team member that they did the right thing by coming to you, and that you are going to set aside some time to talk with Adam. Because in that story, it was clear that you had recognized some stuff and the coworker had recognized some signs that Adam was struggling. So hopefully over the last hour, I think it's been an hour. I have to be honest, I wasn't exactly paying attention to the time. I was paying more attention to the content, that you've built a little bit of skills in being able to identify maybe when somebody potentially could be struggling, and then how to engage them in that conversation, what to say or what to do in that conversation and how to have it, as well as looking at resources and how important they are, and often that we need to access more than one support or resource. Little just quick touch on safety for yourself. So workplaces are really, really good at putting in PPE and controls around their personal protective equipment. There's guards on equipment and gloves. So there's a guard on the saw so I don't hurt myself. And then I get to wear a glove so I don't stick my hand in there to protect myself. And then there's even a sign on the wall telling me to wear the glove and not stick my hand in the fan. So we're really good at recognizing all of those physical aspects to keep ourselves safe, but workplaces are not always the best at recognizing when we need to take care of employees or how to take care of our employees long-term. Often workplaces are very reactive. So something happens, we need to do something about it, rather than how do we build those skills within our staff and our workplace culture. So taking that time for you, what do you use for your mental health PPE? How do you protect yourself mentally, or how do you look after your mental health for yourself so you're good to go to work, so you're good to be able to have those conversations? Other people call it self-care, right? Taking that active role in protecting your mental health. So things like diet and sun and sleep and exercise and gym and yoga. Let's be honest, the gym and yoga are not self-care for this girl. Walking my dog and hanging out with my kids is. So again, just like our mental health is all about us, what works for my self-care and what works for my PPE is about me. And just recognizing and allowing ourselves the same compassion and care and understanding that we are continually giving others in those conversations, that giving ourselves that permission and checking in with ourselves that we are taking care. And then just from a workplace standpoint, right? How do we do that prevention at work? So things through healthy supports. Is our workplace providing healthy supports for their staff? Are we able to build social connections, right? Do we have those social connections at work? I get work is work and home is home, but you spend more time at work most of the time than you do at home. So what are those social connections that you have there? Is the workplace culture positive? When we look at the culture, it's the values and the beliefs and the mission, the interactions. It's the sum of the agency. Is it a healthy agency? Do you want to be there? Not many of us want to be at work. We'd all like to be at home hanging out with our families or doing things that we enjoy outside of that. But unfortunately, I have a mortgage that needs to be paid, so I have to go to work. So then it comes about, what is that culture at the workplace that I am working at? Right? Do they promote mental health? Is it normal to have questions? Is it acceptable to talk about your mental well-being in the workplace? And if it's not, how do we take steps so that becomes acceptable? Because that comes part of that early intervention, right? In Canada, only 23% of staff report feeling comfortable talking to their employers about mental health problems. 23%, less than 1 in 4. That's my social worker math. I can figure that out. Less than 1 in 4 Canadians feel comfortable talking about mental health in the workplace. But yet we know that the more we talk about mental health and the more we talk about suicide and mental well-being, the less people die. Very important conversations to be having. What resources are available, right? Does your workplace have resources available? Are they understandable? And then do they promote self-care? Do they talk about or promote in any way the importance of taking care of yourself so you're able to take care of somebody else? I see the question, Tom, you've got there. How does more people working from home change the ability of coworkers to recognize if someone is struggling? I think that's a whole new ballgame. I think there absolutely are ways to recognize working from home. I know I can only speak within my office that usually we're very engaged. We're still engaged at home. And our director takes great pains, I would say, to make sure that we have ways of being involved. She really goes above and beyond that. But if one of my staff or one of the staff that I work with normally is engaged in staff meetings and now they're not present every morning when we kind of have a daily check-in, that's an indicator for me to be a little bit more hyper aware and go, okay, this is tough times. We're all working in new areas. How do I touch base with this individual to see, is there a reason? Maybe their kids are just being little turds and turned off the internet. Maybe there's a perfectly good reason for them not being there in the morning, or maybe it's a sign that they are struggling. So really just being, I think, extra vigilant in that, recognizing those changes, Tom. I think we have to be more vigilant in this time. Unless anybody else has any suggestions. It's a new ball game. There's no book that says this is what we need to do in a pandemic and this is how we work from home healthy. And we literally are learning as we go and learning even about new supports. There's different supports now that are available than there were in March, right? And just being really up to speed on what new supports and resources are available.
I think it's similar to the agriculture situation, right? Where we talk about farmers not leaving work technically because their work is their home and vice versa. So now with more people working from home, it falls into that similar game with farmers. Game is a horrible term, but you know what I mean. And so I think it's that, like you said, it's that much more important for those that know that person and stay in contact with them to be really hyper aware of changes that they recognize in them or see in them, but it has changed the way people operate, and it's probably going to change it going forward. So it really is expanding the way we have to watch people and be a little more empathetic about how they're doing, and then also for people themselves to be more open and honest with how they're feeling. And for men, it's tough. It's a lot tougher for men than it is for women. I mean, that's why this program started. You know, as a man, I totally understand and recognize that it's a lot easier for women to be open about their feelings, about their struggling than it is for men. And that's just something that is ingrained in our society. But fortunately, it's changing. And, you know, the more we can share programs like this and encourage people, everyone, to be more open and communicate, then, you know, we'll get there. But yeah, it's there's a lot more that are going to be needing to be watched and cared for right now and for the next little while. So.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing. Just give me 1 second, Ainsley. I think too, Tom, you brought up a fantastic point in we're all learning that new normal and being that hypervigilant, and also acknowledging the I guess the toll it takes on us, in the sense that we need to be taking care of ourselves more, because there's more stressors going on for us. We're more susceptible to those stressors. So if we want to be there for somebody else, right, acknowledging that, how can I manage to be there for somebody else? And you're 150% right, Tom. We program our men to not have feelings and to be able to fix stuff and not reach out. And that is the original roots of the men at risk are tough enough to talk about it. So thank you, Tom. Ainsley, I seen your hand was up.
I also wanted to say, not just one demographic. Sorry, my dog is on my lap with a hairball. As an employer, it's really hard too, because you have all of these people around you and you're trying to make sure that everyone is okay, and you're balancing all of these things and being flexible. And at the same time, you know, you have your children home, and you have all of the same level of anxiety over physical health that everyone has and financial health that everyone has. So I think the one thing that I recognize out of this more than anything else is, just like going on a diet, you have to stick to it every day. Self-care is the same. And it's a really good idea to bring back those reminders. Are you doing something today? What is the thing you're doing today to make sure that you're able to help somebody else? And I saw some really good information about social snacking. So making sure you were getting your social supports, even in snack form, whether that was wearing a shield instead of a mask. So when you smile at somebody, they smile back at you, and you get that little boost of, oh, a person is happy to see me. And, you know, saying thank you at the grocery store, and having somebody say you're welcome. Those little connections where you feel like the world is a good place and people are kind. Those little social snacking interactions are really important. And normally we would just take them for granted, and we think that people are nice to us, but when we wear a mask, people don't smile back and all of those things. So actually acknowledging, I feel better because somebody was just kind to me, and somebody just smiled at me, and feeling that boost, so being meaningful about that. Just as a person, you know, struggling with all of these larger anxieties, to know that, you know, the world is a good place and people are kind, really does help give a little boost on those little daily practices. Just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you very much, Ainsley. Ainsley? Joanne, I seen that you had a question in the chat box in regards to achieving kind of that dynamic when we are working from home. I just wanted to kind of check in with you to make sure that the discussion maybe has helped a little bit, or if you still have questions on that.
Nope, it's all clear. I got it. Ainsley provided a lot, so thank you, Ainsley.
Perfect.
I guess going forward, it would be nice to somehow kick up this awareness and get a campaign out there, during COVID, how people can themselves, because we're all struggling and we're worried about ourselves, and everything that we had, was taken away. So a lot of people are slipping between the cracks because everything has changed. There's nothing normal, unfortunately, anymore. So I think it's really important that, we get this message out to people and see if we can help more by educating them with this new norm.
Absolutely, Joanne. I'm on board. If you're on board, let's kick it up.
Yeah.
I love it. So, and we can also, when this is all posted, we can put a link maybe to the social snacking information, or maybe a copy of the poster that Ainsley was, or the information Ainsley was talking about. We'll discuss to see how we can get you some of that information, because I think it is really important to have those resources available so we understand it, so we can continue that conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you for that, Joanne. Anybody else have any comments or anything, any questions? That's what I have for a presentation, and I'm pretty sure I took almost your whole time. And my understanding is you guys normally do a little bit of networking, so I will kind of half apologize for taking most of your time and kind of half not apologize, because I think that the information, I'm a little biased, but I think it's really important that we have that information in some form so we can move forth and really encourage those crucial conversations that save lives. So on behalf of the Resource Center for Suicide Prevention, and I'll speak for Ainsley and myself, thank you again for the amazing opportunity to reach out and share that information. Thank you for being my guinea pigs. And if you have any feedback, I can definitely give you my email address. There's also a link to an evaluation. So if you've, that will be posted as well. If you're able to click on that link and provide a little bit of feedback for the presentation, it's super easy, go straight to my email. We would absolutely love that. All of the feedback is used in program development. So we just don't pick stuff out of the air and say, oh, I want to talk about that. It's actually based on feedback over the last 20 years to build our program on best practices. So thank you. I'll pass it back over to Tom, to the host.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Ainsley. Having been involved with the program for the last 18 years and to see how it's evolved and continued and grown, and yet those core messages are still there. The core messaging, the core supports for people is just tremendous. And thank you for keeping it going. Thank you for continuing to bring it to so many different communities and to so many different people. It's wonderful. And thank you for the work you do at the Resource Center. I wish you all very well, stay safe, and the whole works, and just keep on keeping on, because it is vital information and it's vital support for our community, and I think it's even magnified more with this year and everything that's happened. So thanks for everyone for joining us for our Business Support Network presentation. And if you have suggestions for topics you'd like us to try and find some information for, please feel free to share that with us. Hetty's always open to ideas over at the county, and you can get a hold of her or myself or anyone as part of the support network, and we will call that a day in respect for your time. But thank you again for joining us, and as we said, stay safe, stay well, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye now.